Bad idea detected. Welcome to Dumbora.
Nothing fuels bad decisions quite like greed, confidence, and absolutely no understanding of consequences. 1. In 1719, Scottish con artist John Law convinced France he had essentially invented money's cheat code. His brilliant plan involved the Mississippi Company, which promised investors unimaginable riches from Louisiana, a place most buyers couldn't locate on a map and probably assumed was paved with gold, cinnamon, and politely obedient beavers. Paris lost its collective mind. Aristocrats sold estates, servants emptied savings, and random nobles suddenly became stock experts. Because greed apparently causes instant financial delusion. Shares skyrocketed so fast, people were climbing over each other like it was Black Friday at a gold dealership. The only tiny issue, the wealth was based on fantasy, speculation, and the economic equivalent of "trust me, bro." When reality finally arrived, it hit like a cannonball. The bubble collapsed, fortunes vanished, and France learned an expensive lesson. If someone promises infinite money from swampland, maybe ask at least one follow-up question. 2. In the 1800s, two speculators named Philip Arnold and John Slack pulled off one of history's greatest get-rich-quick scams by inventing a fake diamond mine. These absolute entrepreneurs bought real gems in Europe, then scattered them around a random Wyoming field like deranged billionaires hiding Easter eggs. Investors showed up, found diamonds conveniently lying on the ground, and immediately abandoned common sense. Bankers, businessmen, and experts all stared at dirt sparkling with planted treasure, and somehow concluded, yes, nature definitely arranges itself like a jewelry clearance sale. Even Tiffany's got involved. People poured in money faster than modern crypto bros hearing guaranteed returns. Then geologists finally realized the whole thing looked less like geology and more like a toddler had decorated the desert. The scam exploded, investors were humiliated, and America was reminded that if diamonds are just sitting around waiting for you, you're probably not discovering wealth. You're discovering a scam designed by cowboys. 3. Charles Ponzi didn't just create a scam. He created such a legendary financial disaster that his name became permanent shorthand for, "Congratulations, you funded your own downfall." In 1920, Ponzi promised investors absurd profits using international postal reply coupons, which sounded boring enough to seem legitimate. Nobody understood what he was actually doing, which somehow made it more believable. He claimed he could exploit tiny postal price differences worldwide and turn them into massive wealth. Translation: he wrapped nonsense in paperwork, and people called him a genius. Thousands invested because seeing other people get rich temporarily is apparently stronger than mathematics. Early investors got paid using new investors' money, creating the illusion of brilliance. For a while, Ponzi looked like a wizard in a suit. Then basic arithmetic ruined everything. The empire collapsed, thousands lost fortunes, and history gained a timeless reminder that too good to be true usually means you're financing a con man's vacation. 4. In the 1980s, thousands of Americans decided they could become rich by breeding emus. Yes, emus, the giant birds that look like ostriches designed by committee. The logic was somehow worse than the hairstyle era itself. Investors were told emu oil, emu meat, and emu leather would create unstoppable demand, turning suburban dreamers into feather-covered tycoons. People bought breeding pairs for outrageous prices, convinced these moody dinosaur pigeons were their ticket to early retirement. Entire farms appeared, run by folks who previously couldn't keep houseplants alive. Unfortunately, the actual consumer demand for emu products was nowhere near the fantasy. Turns out average Americans weren't desperately seeking bird oil and giant omelets. Prices crashed, farms failed, savings disappeared, and thousands were left staring into the judgmental eyes of oversized birds they could neither profit from nor emotionally explain to neighbors. It was less financial revolution and more Jurassic Park, but sadder and with bankruptcy. 5. During the Beanie Babies craze of the 1990s, otherwise rational adults transformed stuffed animals into retirement plans. Tiny plush bears with birthdays somehow became investment vehicles, because apparently Wall Street looked too complicated, so America chose collectible squirrels instead. People stormed gift shops, hoarded Princess Diana bears in plastic cases, and genuinely believed polyester pellets would fund college tuition. Entire marriages were probably tested over suspiciously aggressive mall trips. Retired couples, office workers, and suburban parents all bought into the fantasy that limited edition toy giraffes would outperform mutual funds. At peak insanity, some people spent thousands on stuffed animals named things like Snort or Bubbles, as though future generations would battle for them at auction. Then, in a shocking twist no one except reality predicted, the market collapsed. Garages filled with worthless plush. Dreams died under tag protectors. And America learned that if your retirement strategy depends on a bean-filled walrus, you may need a better accountant. 6. In the early 2000s, regular Americans with strip mall offices and Bluetooth earpieces became convinced they'd strike it rich flipping houses, with all the caution of a guy buying fireworks at a gas station. Thanks to cable TV, everyone suddenly believed slapping beige paint on a foreclosure was basically printing money. Realtors, amateur investors, dentists, your cousin Randy. Everybody was building a portfolio. People bought homes with adjustable rate mortgages they understood less than their VCR instructions in 1987. Granite countertops were installed like sacred financial talismans. For a while, profits rolled in, and suburban prophets acted like Donald Trump with better lawns. Then the housing bubble burst harder than a lawn chair under a barbecue enthusiast. Entire neighborhoods became ghost towns of abandoned McMansions and crushed dreams. Turns out buying 7 houses with no money down wasn't genius. It was just monopoly played by people who thought bankruptcy was a government coupon. 7. In the 1970s, California gave America one of its finest financial fever dreams: pet rocks. Gary Dahl looked at the nation, saw inflation, gas shortages, and existential dread, then asked, what if I sell people stones? Not magic stones, not rare gems, literal rocks, the kind your lawnmower hits for free. But he packaged them in cardboard boxes with breathing holes and a training manual, because apparently Americans will buy anything if it's marketed like a low-maintenance Labrador. And buy they did, over 1 million of them. Adults walked into stores, exchanged actual US dollars, and proudly took home geology with branding. Somewhere, actual dogs were probably offended. Dahl became rich almost overnight, proving Madison Avenue could sell common sense right out of the room. It remains one of history's greatest reminders that in America, even a paperweight can become a millionaire if you give it enough packaging and a stupid enough smile. 8. In the late 1990s, the dot-com boom convinced investors that adding .com to literally anything was the financial equivalent of discovering fire. Companies with no profits, no products, and sometimes no coherent sentence structure went public and became billion-dollar darlings overnight. Pets.com sold dog food online at a loss so spectacular, it practically came gift-wrapped with bankruptcy papers. Webvan promised groceries delivered to your home before America was emotionally prepared to trust tomatoes from the internet. Investors threw money around like confetti at a Vegas buffet because everyone feared missing the future. CEOs in turtlenecks became prophets. Commercials looked expensive. Sock puppets became stock strategies. Then reality arrived with a steel chair. The bubble exploded, billions vanished, and countless Americans learned that revolutionary digital disruption sometimes just means an unprofitable business with a website and cocaine-level optimism. 9. In 2008, a man named Bernard Madoff ran a scam so massive it made previous con artists look like kids selling fake lemonade. Madoff promised wealthy investors steady, reliable returns, the financial version of a casino where everyone wins and nobody asks questions. Celebrities, retirees, charities, country clubs. If you had money and optimism, Bernie had a seat for you. For decades, people treated him like the Mr. Rogers of Wall Street, if Mr. Rogers quietly vaporized billions. The scheme worked because greed loves consistency almost as much as it hates skepticism. Investors saw profits, told friends, and kept writing checks like they'd found the fountain of youth with quarterly dividends. Then the Great Recession exposed the whole thing, and suddenly everyone realized their wealth was basically made of lies in a nice suit. Madoff didn't just steal money, he turned financial trust into a national punchline with a spreadsheet. 10. America's gold rushes created many fortunes, but they also created thousands of men who essentially traded stable lives for dirt-based hallucinations. In 1849, people sold farms, abandoned families, and marched west like gold nuggets were handing themselves out beside wagon trails. Bankers became prospectors. Teachers became miners. Perfectly sane adults spent life savings chasing rumors from guys named Cletus, who knew a creek. California became packed with desperate dreamers armed with pans, shovels, and absolutely no geological expertise. Most found hardship, disease, or the exciting opportunity to die muddy. The real winners were often the people selling jeans, shovels, whiskey, and eggs at luxury prices. Levi Strauss got rich. So did merchants. Meanwhile, countless miners discovered that instant wealth mostly meant cholera and disappointment. America's first major get-rich-fast craze proved one timeless truth. During a gold rush, sell the shovel. Don't be the sweaty fool buying it. 11. In the 1980s and 90s, multi-level marketing exploded across suburbia like Aquanet and bad financial decisions. Suddenly, every neighbor with shoulder pads and a cordless phone was retiring early by selling vitamins, leggings, or suspiciously expensive kitchen containers. Living rooms became sales battlegrounds where friendship was now just a funnel towards scented candles and passive income. Brenda from church wasn't inviting you for coffee. She was recruiting you into her downline. The dream was always the same. Be your own boss, set your own hours, and somehow become wealthy by aggressively pitching protein shakes to cousins at Thanksgiving. In reality, most participants made less money than a lemonade stand run by raccoons. Garages filled with unsold inventory. Relationships died under pressure cooker demonstrations. But hope remained eternal, mostly because admitting you'd been scammed by a flip chart was emotionally devastating. Nothing says financial freedom like bankrupting yourself for motivational cassette tapes. 12. Then came cryptocurrency, where millions of adults who once warned kids not to trust strangers suddenly invested retirement savings based on memes, Reddit threads, and a dog logo. Bitcoin at least sounded mysterious. But Dogecoin? That was a joke, literally created as satire, until people decided satire was now a pension plan. Entire Facebook groups of middle-aged investors started talking like tech prophets after watching 3 YouTube videos and buying digital coins during lunch breaks at Home Depot. Overnight, people who couldn't program a microwave became blockchain philosophers. Fortunes appeared. Fortunes vanished faster. Some bought Lamborghinis. Others got stuck explaining to spouses why college funds were now trapped in decentralized moon assets. It was like the California gold rush, except instead of horses and dysentery, you got Discord servers and emotional collapse. Humanity really looked at invisible internet money and said, yes, this feels safer than bonds. 13. In 1637, the Dutch tulip craze proved civilization can absolutely collapse over decorative onions. Tulips, flowers normally appreciated by grandmothers and people who own too many gardening gloves, became the hottest speculative asset in Europe. Certain bulbs sold for more than mansions, livestock, or what was essentially a decent chunk of a person's entire existence. Merchants, craftsmen, and otherwise functional adults started trading tulip contracts like they'd cracked the matrix. People who couldn't afford shoes were somehow discussing bulb futures. At peak madness, one rare tulip bulb could cost as much as a luxury canal house in Amsterdam, which is impressive considering one is real estate and the other is a plant that can be defeated by a squirrel. Then, in one of history's fastest reality checks, confidence evaporated, prices crashed, fortunes vanished. Society remembered that maybe betting your life savings on seasonal landscaping wasn't the apex of economic wisdom. Wall Street would later study this and think, interesting, let's do that again. 14. In the 1920s, Charles Darrow became wildly rich selling Monopoly during the Great Depression, which was already hilariously cruel. America was standing in bread lines, losing farms, and wondering if socks counted as dinner, while millions gathered around kitchen tables pretending to become ruthless landlords. The game's entire premise was financial domination through property hoarding, basically capitalism with tiny hats. Darrow marketed it as family fun, and Parker Brothers turned cardboard greed into a cultural institution. Parents who couldn't pay rent spent evenings bankrupting grandma over Marvin Gardens. Children learned that success meant owning railroads and emotionally crushing siblings. The real irony: monopoly's original roots were meant to criticize economic inequality, but America looked at that warning and said, "Fantastic, let's mass produce it." Darrow became a millionaire teaching struggling families to simulate the exact economic despair they were already living through. Few hustles capture the American spirit better than monetizing fake wealth during actual poverty. 15. In the 1980s, Iraq's Saddam Hussein briefly encouraged citizens to buy heavily promoted investment schemes that sounded suspiciously like national prosperity and functioned more like patriotism with receipts. Across history, authoritarian governments and shady operators alike have mastered one timeless formula: convince people they're not just investing, they're participating in destiny. Whether through state-backed ventures, miracle development projects, or suspiciously mandatory opportunities, regular citizens often discovered too late that blind optimism is not a retirement strategy. People poured savings into promises wrapped in nationalism, prestige, or urgency, because fear of missing out apparently predates the internet by centuries. Then came inflation, collapse, or the shocking realization that trusting absolute power with your nest egg may be riskier than storing cash under a mattress shaped like Reagan. Time and again, the lesson remains undefeated. When someone mixes wealth promises with grand speeches and zero transparency, you're probably not building a fortune. You're financing someone else's statue. 16. In the late 80s, America got absolutely body-slammed by the baseball card boom. Grown adults who once mocked comic books suddenly treated cardboard photos of middle infielders like blue-chip investments. Basements became vaults. Plastic sleeves became sacred relics. Men with mustaches and New Balance sneakers lined up at card shops convinced Ken Griffey Jr. rookie cards would someday replace Social Security. Kids couldn't even enjoy gum without hearing, "Don't bend that corner, that's your inheritance." Manufacturers, sensing easy money, printed cards by the metric ton. Special editions, gold foil. Limited runs that were somehow not limited at all. For a while, collections seemed destined to fund retirements, boats, maybe a Florida condo. Then everyone realized there were approximately 17 trillion mint-condition cards in circulation. Prices cratered. Dreams dissolved. Entire generations were left with binders full of shiny disappointment. America had successfully transformed childhood nostalgia into a speculative bubble, then acted shocked when mass-produced cardboard didn't outperform the S&P 500. 17. In the 1970s, self-help seminars started selling wealth the way infomercials sold AB machines, loudly, aggressively, and with suspiciously shiny teeth. Motivational gurus packed hotel ballrooms with desperate dreamers, promising that positive thinking, visualization, and cassette tapes could unlock millionaire status. For just $499, plus workbook fees, VIP upgrades, and maybe a deluxe handshake package, you too could manifest abundance. Men in polyester suits paced stages like prophets of profit, shouting that poverty was merely a mindset issue. Bills, negativity, bankruptcy, limiting beliefs. Real wealth, conveniently, always seemed one seminar away. Attendees scribbled notes, bought books, and repeated affirmations, while their bank accounts quietly filed missing persons reports. The only people consistently getting rich were the guys selling motivation by the pound. It was financial alchemy for mall-goers. Turn insecurity into recurring revenue. America basically invented a system where broke people paid strangers to explain why they were broke, then called it empowerment. 18. In 2017, the Fire Festival turned get rich quick from investment disaster into influencer apocalypse. Founder Billy McFarland sold luxury paradise with supermodels, yachts, and Instagram-fed delusion, marketing a tropical music festival that looked like Coachella got a trust fund. Wealthy millennials threw money at VIP packages, expecting beachfront villas and gourmet dining. Instead, they arrived to FEMA tents, sad cheese sandwiches, and disaster relief chic. It was less exclusive getaway, more Lord of the Flies sponsored by social media. McFarland's genius wasn't logistics. It was realizing people would spend thousands if enough attractive people pretended it was elite. Investors, attendees, and influencers all got swept up in a scam powered by hashtags and astonishing arrogance. The collapse was immediate, spectacular, and weirdly poetic. In the end, Fire-proofed modern greed doesn't even require gold, oil, or tulips, just orange squares, Wi-Fi, and a breathtaking disregard for reality. 19. And then there was the NFT craze, when society collectively decided the future of wealth was owning digital receipts for pictures everyone else could still look at for free. Suddenly, pixelated monkeys, weird cartoons, and JPEGs that resembled rejected cereal mascots sold for more than suburban homes. Celebrities, tech bros, and former skeptics all transformed into blockchain evangelists overnight. People who once printed coupons were now discussing decentralized art ecosystems like caffeinated philosophy majors. The pitch was incredible. Spend real money on invisible ownership, then hope someone even more optimistic buys it later. It was like the Beanie Baby crash got rebooted by Silicon Valley and given laser eyes. For a brief shining moment, America looked at screenshotable monkey art and said, "Yes, this is generational wealth." Then the market nosedived, fortunes evaporated, and thousands learned a painful lesson. If your retirement depends on proving ownership of a cartoon ape, maybe keep your day job. 20. In 1925, con artist Victor Lustig pulled off what may be history's most disrespectfully brilliant get-rich-quick scheme. He sold the Eiffel Tower. Not metaphorically, not through shares. He literally convinced scrap metal dealers that Paris was secretly dismantling one of the world's most famous landmarks and needed discreet buyers. Lustig forged government documents, rented fancy hotel rooms, and weaponized bureaucracy. The one thing more intimidating than armed guards. One businessman, so blinded by greed and exclusivity, actually paid him for the rights to tear down the Eiffel Tower for parts. Imagine explaining that at dinner. "Honey, I bought Paris." Lustig then vanished with the money before shame could fully bloom. And because humanity apparently learns nothing, he nearly tried it again. This wasn't just fraud, it was performance art with paperwork. He proved the ultimate get-rich-fast strategy isn't gold, stocks, or crypto. It's finding one rich person arrogant enough to believe they've outsmarted an entire country. 21. During the 1980s, televangelist Jim Bakker helped perfect one of America's strangest financial mashups: religion, real estate, and vacation timeshares. Through PTL's Heritage USA, followers were promised spiritual enrichment and family-friendly luxury, all wrapped in the comforting glow of televised salvation. Millions donated and invested, because apparently nothing says divine wisdom like trusting a man in expensive makeup asking for your mortgage payment. Supporters believed they were buying godly retreats and heavenly returns. What they were often funding instead was lavish spending, accounting chaos, and enough scandal to make a soap opera blush. Bakker built a prosperity empire by selling faith-adjacent dreams to people who wanted blessings with resort amenities. Eventually, investigations exposed financial misconduct, and the empire crumbled harder than a buffet tray at a church picnic. It was a uniquely American masterpiece, a get-rich scheme where people weren't just sold false hope. They were upsold premium false hope with Christian branding and complimentary brochures. 22. In 1996, a man named Gerald Barnes tried to become rich in perhaps the most aggressively unnecessary way imaginable, by claiming ownership of the moon. Through the Lunar Embassy, he sold plots of lunar land to eager buyers who apparently looked at Earth's real estate prices and thought, "You know what? Space dirt." Barnes exploited a loophole in international treaties that said nations couldn't own celestial bodies, then boldly decided that apparently meant random guys with printers could. For a few bucks, customers received deeds to moon acres, certificates, and the life-changing knowledge that they technically owned property no human could visit, develop, or even legally defend. Millions of acres were sold. Celebrities bought in. Regular people proudly gifted moonland like futuristic fruitcake. It was one of history's greatest examples of monetizing pure imagination. Barnes essentially became rich selling legally questionable moon coupons, proving once again that if you package nonsense nicely enough, people will absolutely buy imaginary land before reading the fine print. 23. And then came Albanian pyramid schemes in the 1990s. A financial catastrophe so absurd, it didn't just bankrupt people. It practically destabilized an entire nation. After communism collapsed, Albanians were desperate for prosperity. and slick operators promised investment returns so outrageously high, they made used car salesmen look cautious. Citizens sold homes, emptied savings, and invested life fortunes into schemes offering profits that sounded less like economics and more like a casino run by wizards. Nearly 2/3 of the population got involved. Entire families treated fraud like a patriotic retirement plan. For a while, payouts flowed, optimism soared, and basic math quietly packed its bags and left the country. Then, inevitably, everything collapsed. Billions vanished. Public fury exploded into riots, armed uprisings, and national chaos. This wasn't just, oops, bad investment. This was, the economy caught fire because too many people believed magic beans were federally insured. It remains the ultimate monument to greed. When getting rich fast goes so horribly wrong, you don't just lose money, you accidentally speedrun societal collapse. So, which disaster wins? Tulips, moon dirt, or civilization collapsing because greed skipped math?